Hello, my name is Jacian Furuya and I did my presentation on Japanese jazz music. So, why did I choose Japanese jazz music? Um, the main reason is because I am full Japanese, so there wasn't much options. Other reasons would include that my parents own a Japanese radio station called Keizu Radio. This is their logo right here. And I also wanted to learn more about Japanese music since I am Japanese and I don't listen to Japanese music at all. And I wouldn't consider Japanese music even music that I would associate myself with. And I chose Japanese jazz music specifically because through my parents' radio station, I've met a band called Hiroshima, who is a Japanese jazz band, and I've heard them play a couple times, and I thought it was pretty cool. So the location of Japanese jazz music will change depending on where you're looking for the information. And the reason for this is because it originated in Osaka and Yokohama. But as of today and recently, people associate Japanese jazz music more with Tokyo because that is where you'll find most of the jazz clubs and jazz bands playing. So, about Japanese jazz music, Japanese jazz is a very similar style to the American jazz music. They both have pretty much the same characteristics, but Japanese jazz uses Japanese instruments to contrast the American instruments. Two instruments that are commonly used in Japanese jazz would be the koto and the taiko. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the koto. Um, the koto is an instrument that is going to be strung, and it has 13 silk strings and movable bridges. The body of the instrument is made out of paulownia wood and is 74 inches long. So in these pictures you can see that it is pretty long, and it does have a lot of strings and a lot of unique characteristics to the instrument itself. So the other instrument that is commonly used would be the taiko. We learned about the taiko a little bit in this class through the readings that we did for one of our chapters. The taiko drums look like the ones that are shown in these pictures, and depending on the body of the drums, it'll make different sounds and be different from each other. So for example, the long body taiko usually have a deep reverberant sound to it. So now I'll be talking about the characteristics of Japanese jazz. One characteristic would be the syncopation of the song. This is when a musician is trying to keep the music interesting, so they'll use different rhythms throughout the song to make it go up and down so that the listener wouldn't expect what they're about to hear. They won't really know if it's going to be high rhythms or low rhythms, fast or slow. This is kind of related to the next characteristic, which is the polyrhythmic that they use. This is when there are multiple rhythms in the song that contrast to each other. So usually it's going to be different rhythms too, so that it's kind of different sounding, but also it's interesting. The instruments that are used would be the saxophone, piano or keyboard, a drum kit, flute, and the bass guitar. Those are instruments that are used in both Japanese and American jazz. Instruments that are specifically used in Japanese jazz would be the koto and taiko. Some key musicians would be Fumio Nanri. He was one of the first Japanese jazz musicians to be well known outside of his native country. Another key musician in Japanese jazz would be Toshiko Akiyoshi. She received 14 Grammy nominations, and she was the first woman to win the Best Arranger and Composer Award in Downbeat magazine's reader poll. And the last well-known person would be Yosuke Yamashita. He's praised for his unique piano style that is influenced by Japanese jazz. Some key compositions would include Black and Blue, and this was by Fumio Nanri. Another would be Memory by Toshiko Akiyoshi. And lastly, the last one would be One Upmanship, and that was by Yosuke Yamashita. This is an example of Japanese jazz, and this would be Hiroshima playing a song live. So now I'll be talking about changes in Japanese jazz over the years. So at first, Japanese jazz wasn't popular because during World War II, Japanese jazz was actually banned, or jazz in general was banned because it was considered the enemy music. But by the 1950s, after the World War II, jazz became very popular in Japan. Right now, jazz in Japan is one of the most popular genres, and jazz music from the 1920s to the 1930s, the Japanese don't really consider those part of the Japanese jazz tradition anymore because the style of Japanese jazz today has greatly changed. And the future for Japanese jazz, I would say, it looks pretty bright because jazz in Japan keeps growing and it is, as I said, one of the most popular genres. They will probably extend to more cities and try to get more clubs in more cities so that the jazz music can keep growing in Japan. I also feel like musicians, even those who aren't Japanese, will try to integrate into Japanese jazz because that's where that's where jazz is the most popular right now. And Japanese jazz will probably spread out into other countries and become a really big thing because the instruments that are used, which are the taiko and koto, are really peaceful and nice instruments to hear. So I think that other countries will really appreciate the sound of Japanese jazz. And this is my reference page. And yeah, thank you for watching.